And live we are. So I'm going to do the usual tech test. So let me just do the tech test, make sure that I can see us on LinkedIn. Yep, I've got the message to say we are live. So we're good. We're good to rock and roll. Everybody, hold on. Now I've realized there is something that could make a noise. So let me close that. Here we are. So everybody, don't be shy. I mean, this is, as always, all my guests, and I'm super honored that all my guests are amazing and you don't want to miss anybody. But I'm particularly excited today. So if you're here or you're still joining, just don't be shy. Come and say hi. We are here and ready, and we will be getting started. I'd like to say we're warming up, but we're already hot. So I don't think we need to do that. So then sometimes someone will pop up and say hi, or they might actually be shy. Who knows? Because it's rather, what time is it your time now? 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock.
Okay. So people are kind of awake. This is the perfect way to start your day, guys. Perfect way to start your day. Look at these smiles. We could be, I can't. Hi, Rohit. I like that. Eagerly waiting with a capital E. Yes, I like it. I like it. Yeah.
And 5 a.m. on the West Coast, right?
So all for all the early birds. We might be too much like a strong cup of coffee for the real early birds, but they can kind of join later. But I will kind of do my introduction in a second. But as I said, Keith, you know already, like I really am happy that you're here. I really appreciate you taking the time. Hi, Shabangi. Thank you very much. Happy to hear that you're looking forward to it too. So are we. This is the best part of going live. You never quite know what's going to happen. You only have a direction, and that's it. The road is there. How you get there is another story.
Right.
Okay, so it's 5:30 in the evening. Perfect, Rohit. So this is your wind down for the day. So for those who don't know me, so we're going to kick off now. So for those who don't know me, I am, hi, Natalie. Thank you for joining. I know you know me already, Natalie, but in case anybody else doesn't, I'm Leanne Meyer, and I'm the managing director and founder of LM Consulting. And we specialize in gender equality, specifically in senior representation in leadership. And we kind of always want to make sure, we want to make sure that Black women aren't left behind. We firmly believe in broadening the lens and really drilling down to make sure that women aren't forgotten. But as we all know, I talk about Black women a lot because it's really important. And today, you know, everyone knows I have my series, Making an Impact, High Flow. And today is really exciting for me because I have Keith on the show, and the tagline today is live your values and know your value. And that right there can take you anywhere. But Keith has a particular take that's so powerful, but also touched me personally, that we couldn't, and I'm saying we, guys, because I'm very much here in the audience. We couldn't afford to miss this. We couldn't afford not to learn. And I'm here, as much as I'm the host, I'm here learning as well, and I'm taking notes. So without much further ado, Keith, thank you for joining, and please let everyone know a bit about yourself, and then we can carry on.
Hi, Leanne. First of all, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. She said I'm Keith Pigues, and I just enjoy kind of hanging out and helping people get where they're trying to go, right? We talk a lot about value, but I lead 2 companies, Luminas Strategy, which is a value proposition development consultancy, and we work with Fortune 1000s and large not-for-profits to really help them understand what their value proposition is, how to quantify that value proposition in their customer or stakeholders' terms so they can make the right kind of investments to grow, right? And then the second company that I lead is CulTRUE, and we are a culture analytics company. And so we really help organizations to answer a very important question, which is, does your organization have the culture you say it does? And that question is an often misunderstood and often overlooked, and sometimes wrongly answered question. But when you can get that perspective from the perspective of your employees, you might get a different take than if you answer it from a leadership perspective, right? And so, yeah, so that's where I spend my time hanging out, in those two companies, and happy to be here with you and your audience today.
Thank you so much. So I think we should just pretty much jump in. I mean, you started off with the value proposition, but can you kind of walk us through a little bit about your own journey? How did you come to, first of all, find your values and then manage to live them and then embody that in what you do within Luminas?
So it has been a long and a little bit of a winding road, but there was a moment back in the early 2000s where I was reading The Purpose-Driven Life and by Rick Warren, and working through the workbook. And one of the exercises there is to develop your life purpose statement. And I thought it was a little hokey, develop your life purpose statement, right? But I went through it, and at the end, I developed this statement. And the statement is to help people get more out of work and life than they ever thought possible. To help people get more out of work and life than they ever thought possible. And when completing that, I felt like, okay, that's me. That is me. And as I talked to people who knew me well and kind of ran it by them, it really fit. And for the first time, I felt like I'd uncovered what was really important to me, what would be fulfilling to me beyond, what was on my resume, right? Wasn't about what I studied at the university. It wasn't about what jobs I'd had and what titles I'd had and all of that. It was really about, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to affect in the world, right? And so now, being the overachiever that I am, and being the person who has to turn everything into, an operations and P&L, I said, this is great, but I'm not sure I can activate this, right? So I took that exercise and I went a little bit further, and I said, okay, why don't I connect my gifts and abilities, those things that I've been given. Again, not what I studied in the university or what experiences I had, but what have I been given naturally, right? I call them gifts and special abilities that I've been given for this purpose. If this is my purpose, right, certainly I've been equipped, right, for this purpose.
Right.
And so I identified, overachiever, 5 areas that I then ran by, people that I knew well to get, validation. So, and they are these gifts and abilities to bring this thing to life called my purpose, right? And they are speaking, writing, teaching, coaching, and advising. So now when I deliver my purpose statement, it's to help people get more out of work and life than they ever thought possible through speaking, writing, teaching, coaching, and advising. And so literally everything that I've done since then, I've tried to do through those lenses, right? And so if you ask me what I'm involved in, and mostly what I've been involved in since that time in the early 2000s, you can find it somewhere in that mix.
Right.
And what it's helped me to do is to focus on the things that are purposeful, that I really can add value to because they're within my gift set. And it's helped me to filter out those things, a lot of requests to be involved in things, to be on boards, to be involved in organizations. And I run it through that filter and I go, let me find you someone else if it doesn't fit what I'm about and how I can help.
So can we go back to one thing? Because I think when we first spoke about this concept or spoke about how you even came to it, one of the most powerful parts for me was this part about depending on if you're atheist or not, but I'm going to call them in this case, God-given abilities, right?
Absolutely.
How do you, or how did you manage to really refine that process of not saying, I think I'm good at this because, but actually filtering down and saying, this is a thematic to my life. This is what I am clearly good at. How did you get to that process? Because of course it's easy to say, what are my God-given abilities? Okay, I actually do know what some of them are, but if someone has no idea where to start, putting the book aside because that wasn't what you used the book for. How do you get to finding your filter to saying, this is what I know I can do, come rain or come shine?
That's a good question. So I went through a couple of exercises, and I think I shared with you earlier. I actually went through the process of codifying this and actually developed life purpose coaching, which I never thought I would do. And I don't do that anymore, but I did that for a while because I went through the process myself and shared it with others. People began to ask, well, can you help me with that? Can you help me with that? Right.
Right.
But the process that I went through was saying, okay, what are the things that I cannot not do? All right. Where do I find myself doing things all the time, not because it's a part of a job or it's because of a money-making venture, but it's where I find myself doing what I do naturally, which with therein you find, gifts and abilities I'm naturally drawn to. I would do them for free. Do them without fail. People recognize that, and they often ask me to do those things.
Right.
I mean, I was speaking as long as I can remember, from a child, and I speak now professionally, but I've never been trained to speak. I've never taken a speaking class. Well, I did enroll in Toastmasters for a year when I was 21, but writing, I write. I don't know. God gave me the ability to write. So writing is something. I mean, I won a school-wide writing competition when I was in high school. I wrote the paper the night before the deadline. I submitted it. I'm in the assembly. When they're making the award, they call my name. I had this out-of-body experience. It was and it won the school-wide writing competition. I don't know. People have been asking me for advice forever. Once, when I was a chief marketing officer, been a chief marketing officer 4 different times. My executive assistant asked, "Who are all these people who keep coming to your office?" And they were employees in the company who were coming for advice, career advice. They weren't in my organization. The word got out. And so I had these people showing up over and over again. So all those are just proof points. So I look back to the proof points of the things that I was doing and had done and was confirmed or validated by others, right? Because sometimes we can think that we're really, really good at something, and that might not be the case, right? So that's how that process worked, really. It was like no more scientific than that. And then we do know us, right? And if we can be real honest with us, we know us. We know what we're good at and what comes naturally for us and what doesn't.
Agreed. And I think there's a part of this, and just to add to your point, I mean, I would say put seniority aside for 2 seconds. And I'd say to anybody just looking back on my own personal experience, extrapolate the part of the job you do versus what you actually enjoy doing, which means in a lot of the cases, I had my job, but at a certain point, you kind of find yourself, you can do your job in your sleep, but you're seeking another challenge. And in many cases, the challenge that you are seeking is the fulfillment of your skill set. And you find it somewhere else, and you find a way to express it that might not be part of your job. It might just be something, as you said, it's not about what you get paid for, but how does this thematic follow you in all parts of your life? Are you the kind of person that likes to bring people together? Are you a social person? As you said, do you advise a lot of people? What is it that your skill, some people say, oh, yeah, people tell me I'm great at this. And they don't necessarily take it on board that that's life giving you a hint at that is where your God-given, your inherited, whatever, your innate skill set is. And I think there's a lot to be said for really sharpening your instincts. And it's not always easy because there's so much noise around that you don't even realize that you need to do it. But it's taking that time to really reflect, because only when you reflect on your skills can you kind of match it up to your values and then know how to express them in a way that's fulfilling for you, but also the most effective for the people you're trying to serve.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and honestly, this work and what you're talking about there is the basis of CulTRUE. I mean, so that experience that I just shared with you back from early 2000s was the genesis of CulTRUE. So it's been coming along for a long, long time. And I began really focusing on the individual, and I talked about the life purpose coaching. I mean, I had friends who would say, I need to have you take my son or my daughter through this process, right? So people started paying me, right? Like, I was like, okay, there are a lot of people searching for purpose, right? But it was all focused on the individual. And then I was preparing for work in my other company, Luminas, with 2 clients, and they'd hired me to do these keynotes for their leadership team around value proposition and how to become more customer centric, organizations, et cetera. And both of them, at the time I had a personal website, which I don't have any longer, but both of them had gone to my personal website and doing the background work for the keynotes and came to me and said, hey, we saw that you're doing some work around personal value proposition and fulfillment and purpose and all that. Could you split your keynote, spend the first part talking about what you do at Luminas, right? Which is the relationship between us and our customers. And then we spend the second half of the keynote talking about the relationship between our company and our employees, because that's increasingly important and challenging for us.
Right.
And I'm thinking, really? You want me to split the keynote? Because I was so focused on, what I did. Right? And then I stood back from it and said, there's something in here, right? There's something in here. Because before I was only focused on purpose and fulfillment as the individual, right?
Right.
And what I realized was that that's a big problem and a big opportunity for companies. And since that time, it has become only a greater opportunity. Because as you said, people are sitting in jobs, but the jobs don't define them. No. There are aspects of the job that they do because they have to. And then there are aspects of the job they do because they want to, and they cannot not do them.
Right.
And you can find a way to match the job with what you really are purposeful about, what brings fulfillment, then you got a great match. And then, by the way, you'll do better, you'll stay longer, and that works well for our company's retention efforts, right? So there's a business proposition there, but not a lot of organizations have gone to that level of really thinking about their people in that way. And so we ask, how do you know your people? I mean, for real? Do you really know? Because if you don't understand what brings a person fulfillment, you don't know them. You might know their CV, right? You might know their track record. You might know their performance reviews, right? You may know all those things, all the degrees they have, right? But if you don't know what really brings fulfillment, you don't know them. I was having a conversation with an executive at Microsoft a couple years ago, and we were talking about this whole notion of fulfillment. And she says, I don't think we really know our people. And I said, well, I'm convinced that you don't, based on what you shared with me. Because she said, we have people that leave the organization and they go and do things we never dreamed an employee would leave Microsoft to do. They're not going to a competitor to make another $1,000, right? They're not going, to another tech startup, to work for a smaller company where they can really have a greater impact in the early stage, of an organization. They're going to do things like clean water projects, right? They're going to, work with the homeless. They're going to, work in an art studio, right? And, they're scratching their head we've got this, highly paid software developer who we've got on our plan to promote and to do great things. And they just show up one day out of the blue and say, I'm leaving and I'm going to work on this clean water project in India.
Right. Ciao, ciao. And they've gone.
Right.
But wait, it's almost like,
whoa.
It's that part about being in any relationship, when people say the person broke up with them out of the blue. Out of the blue, there were signs. The question is, were you prepared to look at the signs? And the other question is, do you value that person's sense of fulfillment? Because the other point is, leaders might see that my fulfillment is A, but they think that they know what's better for me, which is also what's better for the company, not realizing that those are two very different propositions. What you might think is better for me isn't always the case. And this is where that sense of attuning your ear to what you're being told as opposed to what you would like to hear it's a hard job.
Do you have the culture you say you do?
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Or do you, or did you listen to your people? Did you ask your people? Right. Is this culture we say we have, is it really the culture that we have? Is it one that is truly contributing to your fulfillment? Or
but let's take it one step further. If you ask the question, do your employees believe the question is rhetorical? Because you may ask it, but they also, I've been there, they've gone, give your honest feedback. And you sit there and you go, hold on, is this a trick? If I give my honest feedback, what happens now? Do they want the honest feedback, or do they want me to tell them what they want to hear? Because that's also the part of finding out someone's fulfillment and someone's values. I have to trust many things. One is I have to trust that you're not going to laugh at me and make a joke out of it. Two, I have to trust that you understand that my values aren't a conflict of interest. To how you see it. Because a lot of big corporates, what their main motivation besides having employees is control. There is still a lot that people haven't really dug deeper into, the slave owner mentality, that we are still very much, we may only work 50, 60, 80 hours a week, but we're expected to be employees 100% of the time.
Come on, Leanne. Come on.
So when you're asking me about my fulfillment, I don't know how much you really care about it, because you've claimed me, you've stamped me, and you've said you're mine. So when we're talking about fulfillment, somehow it has to be leadership that has to enlighten themselves, and they have to go on the educational piece first, because they're responsible for socializing all of these concepts. They have to kind of understand that it's not about giving freedom. If they don't do it long term, back to your point, Keith, it's a business proposition. Do you really want to have to hire someone new versus losing loads of talent? Because I think you started your business in the early 2000s, and I think maybe it was 2017 that McKinsey came out with this report about saying people stay longer if they feel as though their values are heard and met, but they also stay longer if they feel that the work that they're doing is meaningful and contributes to a higher purpose.
Right. Right.
If your higher purpose is only your bottom line, then where do we go from here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the problem we're working to solve. And it's interesting because when you have this discussion, we start at the top, right? When you have this discussion about your company culture and the extent to which it's, contributing to the fulfillment of your people, and you ask the senior leaders first, not asking them as leaders, asking them as people. They then have to wrestle with their own sense of purpose and the extent to which this culture and those cultural values or core values that they've approved with the help of the outside consultant, right? And they get really excited about, they have to ask the question, do these contribute to my own fulfillment? And in some cases they do, and in some cases they don't. So how can you be an authentic leader if you know that some of these values that you purport as being the core values that you stand on don't even resonate with you? They don't even contribute to your fulfillment. So you're right. Leadership has to first take a crack at it and say, let's just be authentic and let's be genuine. What we say is, we really don't care, sort of. We really don't care what you do when you get the answer, right? Because you have two options, right? You can get the answer and say, okay, these are our core values, which represent our culture, and this is the extent to which they contribute to our people's fulfillment or not, where not, why not, right? You got the answer. We don't care what you do with it, but you do have two options. One, you can say, this is our culture, and I'm sticking with it. It's been our culture for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, and we're sticking with it. Okay, if that's the case and you believe that's the case, great. Well, at least perform some screening on the front end to screen in those people, right, who are the best match for your culture, right? And screen out and save the headache of having those people come and ruining their lives and careers because you know from the word go, it's not a fit. Okay.
Right.
Or option two, you can say, you know what? There are things in our culture which really, really, really contribute to our people's fulfillment. Let's double down on those. And now we found there are some things that don't work. They work against the very thing we're trying to create. So maybe we need to make what we would call some strategic shifts in our culture, right? To right size our culture for today and beyond, right?
Right.
We're not going to tell you which of those paths to take. You choose, right? But in any case, let's get the waste out of the system. Let's not have these relationships form between organizations and their people based on a more limited knowledge of both parties, right? Let's bring a little bit more of this to light so you can make a more confident, more informed decision. That works for everybody.
Preach. That's exactly the point. Like, save yourself, on the one hand, save yourself the time and the effort. If this is what your values are, if your values are I just want robots, then make your values that our mission is to drive a robot-like business with humans that don't think for themselves. Fine, like go for it, go for the stars, and you will find people to do that. But do not, under any circumstances, create these really, and I'm going to steal Dean's word here, visionary type values to then expect people to diminish themselves in order to make you as leadership feel better, whilst they themselves are trying to implement and affect the values of the company. And today, as in 2021, a year after George Floyd has been murdered, we are still mid-pandemic. Your values better match up with whatever else it is you're saying. Because you may take one part of A, but if you take option A, also be in the knowledge that everybody is now holding you accountable for not wanting to promote equality, equity, social justice. So you're giving them an offer, you're giving them two options, but we really know there's only one. Because if you want to be a business of the future, you may have had a 200-year-old history, but what do they say when you kind of go and invest in funds? Past performance is not indicative of future performance, future returns. So you can have a 200-year track record, but guess what? Your reputation can actually be in the dust. Just like that, if you're not choosing to take any steps, any sense of initiative to live your values as people. Because the truth is, it's like what you said to me as well before, Keith. It's the fact of when you decide to walk in your values and live your values, you can't not do it because it's who you are. So it doesn't matter if you go to the left or to the right. Somebody presents you an option. The lens, you know what? I can't even say the lens is on. It's in here. This is what you see. This is what you do. So it's not actually a question of, oh, what can I say on this side? What can I say on this side? If anybody talks to Keith, they know what he's going to come with because this is his value set. And it should be so clear cut within a company. If somebody who is on the junior level has no idea what the company's values are, then you have no company values as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, you're right, Leanne. You're spot on. And Dean's comment, I mean, just really highlights that, right? And so, and here's a problem. There are three different levels of values, right? And so the first level, which we talk about, is your claims, right? And organization's claims, right? And in many cases, they are aspirational, right? So, whatever that core value is, right? But they speak it as though it is fact, as though it is present, as though it is ever present in our organization.
Can we stop? Because they say 3 times for emphasis. So can you speak that first sentence again, please, about aspirational versus fact? Because that is such a key one that we have to all take in and breathe it in a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and in fact, when you look at it, you go to any company's website, you look at their core values. If you're an employee, right, go to your company's website, look at the core values, read them, and ask yourself the question, is that my experience with the people I work with on a regular basis in this organization. This collaboration they talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this care for people, right? Does it represent, right? And what we'll find is that in many cases, some of these attributes, right, are aspirational, right? And that's okay to have aspirational values. Just say that they are. Just say, here's who we are today, and here's who we are attempting to become. But that's not the way most of them are presented. Here are our core values. Here's what we value, and here's what you can expect as it relates to behaviors with our people and what you will experience. Well, many of them might be aspirational. And then if you go down to the second lens, second level, there are policies, right? And policies, they're not one-to-one with values, right? But they're like bookends. On the one hand, there are some things that we really, really want people to do, right? As it relates to the values and the behaviors, resulting behaviors. So that's one bookend. Here are things we really want people to do, and we'll incentivize people to do them, et cetera. The other end, the other bookend is things we really don't want people to do. You'll get fired if you do this, right? So we go from these values, right, which in many cases are aspirational, to the policies, right? And then we get to what we believe the place where the real values show up. And that's each employee's lived experience, right? Now, so when you look at those values as an individual member of the team, an individual employee, and you ask yourself the question, in my experience with my manager or supervisor, the team members with whom I work regularly, right? Does my experience reflect what I see in the company values? That's the true measure of culture. It's not what's on the printed page. It's not what's on the website. It's not what's in the annual report. And it's not between the bookends of the policies. It is what Leanne experiences or Keith experiences or whomever experiences every day working with the people we work with on a regular basis. That is your culture. Now, you can ignore it. You can pretend that it doesn't exist, but that is the culture of your company, which is why most people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Correct.
Right, because that manager is the best representation of your culture. You don't have to like it or agree with it, but it is the truth. So if you have not taken your culture and reduced it down to the experience of an individual employee with that manager and team that they work with, and if you can't examine it at that level and make changes to it at that level, you should really stop talking about culture.
Keith, I just have to take a break myself because I just feel like I'm going in the wind right now. Right, and that's the point. That's the point. Going right down, because it's this. Oh my gosh, you've given me so much to say. I have to think about where I want to gather my thoughts to start. The two things. You have aspirational values, and that's fluidity. You then want to put fluidity on top of rigidity. There is no. How does that work?
It doesn't. Not for the human mind.
Correct. So you kind of said to me,
I'm confused. Right?
Confused, right? But even within the policy, there's shades of gray, right? Within the policy, there's shades of gray of what people don't necessarily understand. And this is the part about listening to the culture, because quite rightly, everything is subjective. Everything is open to interpretation unless you decide to make it so clear that there's nothing that anybody says, okay, I don't know what I'll do in this situation, because it should be apparent. And if the lived experience of someone in the company, Leanne's lived experience, Keith's lived experience, is bad, this should be a learning moment. It's to put your ear to the ground and say, what vibrations am I getting back? Am I getting back what I thought I would? Am I getting back something worse or better? It doesn't always have to be to the negative. But what we do know is that there are always, what are they called, flares. There are always flares that fire up. And there are always those flares that fire up for one particular manager in one way, shape or form. Yet still the manager's still in the company. And you ask yourself, well, your culture says we stand by this and this and this and this and this. Your values are this and this and this. but you have this big problem here. Everyone will tell you, don't say anything, but this one has got away with murder. That's reflection of your real culture.
And
that you pick
everybody
and
knows
choose.
it. And
Right.
it's not like it's a secret, right? Everybody knows it, right? And so we just lied, right? We just said what we have printed on the page, what's on our website, what's in our annual report. We don't believe that. And our people know it.
Right.
People know it. They can tell you. They can tell you. They'll tell you
get out clause.
Which division you should work in and which division you shouldn't work in. What team you should be a part of and what team you shouldn't be a part of, right? The groups that everyone's trying to flee. I mean, come on, right? Everybody knows, right? But leadership will not be honest, because what they really say is, we value the dollar, that person's performance, that person's contribution above the values of the company. And they'd be better respected if they just said that.
And everyone would know. I mean, I recently made a video, I think it was last week, about courageous leadership. Because when you, like you said, Keith, everybody knows when you think about any changes you're trying to make within a company, you speak about it. But in the back of your mind, I will know, you know something, Keith's going to be a problem here. Courageous leadership is pushing past Keith being a problem. Deal with Keith. Deal with him whatever which way. Coaching, you don't have to go and fire him first, but the point is, deal with it, because until you deal with those problem issues, everything else that you're doing as a company is a lie. There is no values. There are no values, I should say. There is no truth to what you're doing. And until you get rid of you laser the boil, or lance the boil, as it were, there's nothing around it that will function and believe that your approach as a company to anything is authentic. Because as long as I can see the eyesore over there and you're not doing anything about it, I don't believe that you're genuine and your intentions are pure in the way that you say it, because there's a huge disparity between words and actions.
And then I see the person who's not living the values promoted, advanced. Then I see that leader who is clearly not, a representation of the value, speaking inauthentically. Mm-hmm. And then I get a link to an engagement survey. And you say, I want you to be honest. I want you to really tell me what you believe about your experience here and the degree to which you're engaged, right? We really value your opinion, but yet you don't take any action and haven't taken any action on any of the feedback in the last 10 years, meaningful action. And you keep asking me, and then you say, I don't want you to take the engagement annually. I want a pulse. So let's do it every 6 months. No, every 3 months. How about every month with just 2 questions? Well, the questions haven't changed. The sentiment hasn't changed. And you're frustrating me every time you ask me to complete this doggone survey, right? Because I know that you haven't done anything with the feedback that I've given you and that we've given you collectively for the past 5-10 years, right? And the actions are completely in opposition to what you say. Really? I mean, come on. I mean, and that's when people say, I know that when I was born, it was dark outside. Yeah, it was during the night, right? But give me a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. It wasn't last night. Come on, guys. Back here, right?
Yeah, up the credit.
Some organizations do, and it's because they are self-oriented, self-centered.
Yep.
Me, mine, and ours. They are not truly interested in a relationship with their employees. Because let me tell you, it's about a relationship, and it's an equal relationship. In fact, prior to the pandemic, when an unemployment rate was about 3%, and now post-pandemic, where forecasts are that the unemployment rate would be somewhere between 2 to 3% on a long-term basis, I would argue that it's not even an equal relationship. Employees rule. Employees have the power because they can pick up and leave. Let me make it even more challenging. Baby boomers might have stayed there and dealt with it. Millennials and Gen Z, which by 2025 will represent somewhere around 70% of the working population, will not stay for a second. And I say hats off to them, congratulatory claps all around, because they are forcing leaders to deal with this. Forcing.
Right.
Say, if you want to get with me, this is how you have to roll, right? And
right.
So now organizations can decide, either I want to win with millennials and Gen Z, or I don't care. And I'm convinced that those who don't care, they don't have to care because they won't be around.
Right, that's it. And I was going to just say to your other point, one of the things that I think has long not been realized, that whilst we get money, or whilst employees get money, there's one critical thing here. We give a priceless commodity. The one thing we can't get back is time. And millennials, apparently I am one, so I'm just going to throw that in there, and Gen Z have cottoned on to that. You can throw all the money at me in the world, but this minute right here, I can't get it back once it's gone. So if I'm going to work for you, our values have to be aligned. You have to be interested in me. You have to be interested in how I work. You have to understand that seat presence is not correlative to productivity. I want people don't like the phrase work-life balance, but I want to, as long as my output matches your end goal, then that should be all you care about to a certain extent. But you have to think about me, not the other way around. But hold on one second, Keith. We have some questions. I'm gonna throw one in. We have one from Stacy. How do you influence organizations to change culture?
Stacy, that's a very, very good question. I think if we're going to have a shot at this, the first thing is that leaders have to get real, right, with themselves. I think as long as leaders are disconnected from the reality of culture and the impact of culture, positively or negatively, on their people, they don't get it. So leaders have to first go through a process of really understanding their own purpose and their own fulfillment, and being very honest about the extent to which the culture is contributing to their own fulfillment or purpose, right? When they can step out of the shoes of leader, and step into the shoes of person, real person, not a title and a role, but a real person in life, because work-life balance, some of them may be dealing with the issues of caring for elderly parents, right? Or caring for loved ones and they would like more flexibility to be able to provide that care. Some of them may be dealing with children who have issues and need care. Some of them might be dealing with the guilt associated with working long hours and not being in their kids' lives and wanting to have more flexible time to spend with their kids. I mean, just a couple of examples, right? They're people, humans. And so I think organizations have to allow the leaders to be human first. Then they can actually see the humanity in their people. So, and I think apart from that, it's just an exercise. It's just an initiative. It's just another thing to do, unless we can give the leaders a space to be people.
And I think there's part of it. I think there's two parts, I agree. Leadership need the space to be people, but they also have to, in themselves, want that space to be people and not to be revered as demigods, because there is still very much that God complex in a lot of leaders. I am invincible. I can do what it is that I want. And, to James's point, he just made it here. And I've seen this as well. As long as they can afford to disconnect, they won't change. And I think this is where the tide is turning, to your point, Keith, in terms of millennials and Gen Z. And because I read an article about this a couple of years ago, just basically saying that same point, that this is going to be the first time in history that we will be the majority. And that's the only real point that we can make the change. Because up until then, until there is a real bottom line, and unfortunately, we shouldn't always have to talk in these terms, but for a lot of leaders today, we can talk about humanizing the process, which we absolutely need to do. But in many cases, they don't want to humanize it because the disparity between the amount they earn versus what junior people earn, they can't even begin to imagine, just like I can't imagine what it's like to live a life as a billionaire, what problems a billionaire has. They can't imagine the problems that a quote unquote normal person would have to even be sympathetic to the cause. And I think there's definitely, in terms of learning, there's definitely a part of this that says they need to learn to be humble. They need to go through the exercise of humility to understand that it's not just about people choosing the positions that they're in, that there's a lot of factors that play into that, but their responsibility of leadership is to lead the company to profitability, is to be the beacon to speak out on social injustice, but is to also be the life and breadth of values. They need to breathe that. They need to show that. They need to embody that in every which way. And it shouldn't be a case of, you can't talk to that person because he's the head of the department, because that's all distancing that doesn't bring a culture, right, in my opinion. Right.
I agree. And if we expect leaders to lead with the company values, we might have a shot at getting this right if we have company values that are truly authentic.
Right.
Okay. And then the board, right, the advisory committee, right, should hold those leaders accountable for getting those results. Absolutely. However, getting those results consistent with our cultural values.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes not one or the other, both.
Right. Because the point is that when you're looking at your strategy and how you want to achieve it, how are you looking at that through the lens of your values? How do they stack up to your values? Or are your values something over there to the left that nobody needs to really look at because you're trying to achieve this return? You're trying to achieve this profit margin. And I know I had a conversation recently, and it's like, there's nothing to say you can't be, there's still profitability with purpose. They're not mutually exclusive. You can do both, but you still have to do that intentionally. You can't, it doesn't happen by accident. No one said values are always easy, because in a company situation, it's very difficult. It's very different. But once you do, and it's intrinsic to how you are, then it becomes easier as you go along. The question is, how willing are you to do the initial difficult work, the graft, the feedback that will be unpleasant, the getting to know yourself, the getting to know your own values before you can even put the company's values on top. Because you can't seek to be a person who purely reflects the company's values if you don't have your own. Then you still, to all intents and purposes, soulless.
Yeah, so it's a requirement of leadership, or should be a
right
requirement of leadership. Right. So, but I tell you, you mentioned that it's about profitability, and sometimes they say profitability covers a multitude of sins, right? Because there are some people who are on the board or in leadership or share owners, right, who might say, we're okay, we're okay. But I do believe the thing that's different now is the makeup of the workforce. Because millennials and Gen Z again, and others, by the way, millennials and Gen Z have given other generational cohorts a license to do what they've always wanted to do, but were afraid to, or felt incapable of doing, or not empowered to do, right? But now, the majority is, right, or soon to be majority is saying, no, this is how we're going to do it, and everybody else can come along. But if you have people who you rely on, who you need to deliver that profitability, who opt out, things change. And that's why things have begun to change. Because the profitability, sustained profitability, will not be possible.
Right.
If you don't make the adjustments, right, to create cultures that are really contributing to the fulfillment of all of your people. And when millennials and or Gen Z represent a significant percentage and soon to be majority, you're left without a choice. But let's face it, most organizations change when there is no choice. Most of them.
Some have to get burned first.
Leading edge and will be early adopters or innovators, right? And so they can see the future, but most organizations can't see the future. They live in the present. And so now when the present situation is one that's not tenable, right? Then they go, okay, it's time to change. That's 80% of organizations. but that day is coming, if not already here.
You stole that completely out of my mouth, whereas I'm just about to say to you, they've banked on there not being a sense of urgency, but it's here. The time to change is actually now. You know, there was a window, and I'd say the window lasted about a year, but everybody else you're coming thereafter. You're now trying to retrofit this as quickly as possible to make it look like you have values that are authentic. But what's the word? Everything coming to fruition is an investment cycle. You're going to take 3 to 5 years until you truly see the benefits, but you're going to have to make some changes that have a very, very quick turnaround time for the fact that people are looking. And as you said, the door is there and millennials and Gen Z are going to use it.
Right.
So when you start to look at your retention figures, what are they going to tell you? Having to train staff every 6 months. Nobody stays longer than a year. There's the answer, just in numbers, what your culture looks like. You get people in the door because your values seem to speak to them.
Right.
But they leave because there's a clear disparity between what you're saying or who you're saying you are or purporting to be and how you live that, how they live it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So that takes us full circle, right? All the way back to where you started with me.
Right? It does.
My life purpose statement, right? To help people get more out of work and life than they ever thought possible. We do that in Luminas with really the relationship between organizations and their customers or their clients. Mm-hmm. And we spent, a lot of years, 15 years, really kind of working through that. And it's really interesting with that experience, that those deep insights we're able to capture. And in my role, having been a chief marketing officer, we've taken that thinking across the organization to the other equally, if not more important relationship. And it's the relationship between a company or organization and its employees or its people, right? And so the impact that we're having really is stealing, if you will, or borrowing the learning from how to solve the marketing relationship problem, company and customers, and bring it over to the customer employee problem. And I think the reason that we're able to see this so clearly is because we didn't grow up in HR. We didn't grow up in HR, right? We grew up in, many of us, in marketing and understanding insights and understanding how to quantify value, right? So the question becomes, what is your employee value proposition? Because that really is a group of people that you have to serve with a winning value proposition. And you have to think about strategically what you're trying to achieve, what strategy you want to take, what investments you need to make, and how you measure returns. Well, if the currency, if you will, in the relationship between you and your customer or client is money, that's the currency that we're using as a measuring stick of success. Got it. Okay. By the way, but mutual value, right? Two parties in the relationship. Right. Likewise, if we look at the currency between yourself and your people or your employees, right? We believe it's fulfillment, right? And there's got to be a way to measure that, right? Which is what we're doing with data and analytics, right? And allowing you to see aspects of the relationship you could not see before. And they're actionable, right? And so now you can decide, again, to make a decision or not to make a decision, to take an action or not to take an action. We're Swiss, all right? But what we will do is give you the data.
So we know there's no opt-out. There's no way you can hide behind, I didn't know, because you have the data. Yeah. But I really love that concept of using fulfillment as the currency between the company and the employee. That's an awesome concept. I like that a lot, because I wasn't sure which way you were going to go then after you said the currency between the company or the customer and the company. But I love that, because I thought you were going to say money, but I was thinking, but it's not money. But then when you said fulfill, of course it's not. But I was like, but what could the alternative be? The alternative is fulfillment. And that right there is something, even if 25 corporates watch this, that would be, for me, the one thing I want them to take away. The currency that you're trading on is mutual fulfillment. How do I provide my employees with the fulfillment that they feel engaged, valued, as though they belong, seen and heard? So that their loyalty grows and that they stay. And what does that have a consequence for you? It means they work harder without being asked. It means they do more for you and the company. Therefore, success is also yours. Because I think there is that missing part about, we've got so steeped in employees being owned and not being taken care of, that companies forget that if you invest in your employees, you also get a return on your investment.
Look, no company owns employees, first of all, right? That's an old notion. First of all, it was never true. And now it's actually pretty obvious and pretty apparent that it's not true. People come and go. At the end of any given day, right, we square up. Now, you may have some long-term agreements, right? But at the end of any given day, we squared up. If you've gotten from that employee what that employee committed to deliver to you, and you likewise delivered to that employee what you committed to deliver to the employee, you're square, right? And apart from some long-term agreements that have clauses, right, of how you settle up, everybody's free to go wherever they want to at the end of any day. And people are increasingly deciding to exercise that option. And the gig economy, which is growing by leaps and bounds, is really indicative of that. People are like, look, I want to roll the way I want to roll, with whom I want to roll, for the time I want to roll. Now, so organizations are going to have to change the way they think about this. And so the only way you can ensure that people are going to roll with you and deliver what you desire to get out of the relationship is you're going to have to take the attitude that if I only had independent contractors, if I only had gig economy workers in every role, my value proposition has to be so strong that at the end of every day, they choose to stay with me. Come on, if I had a mic, I'd drop it.
Listen, I was thinking the same thing because I have no more words. That's it. Just do that. There you go. You dropped it. I can't figure out where my camera is. There we go. Drop it. That's it.
That's it. Because that will be the norm. And those organizations that figure out how to do that now will be the winners.
100%. I have nothing further to add, Your Honor.
Thank you for having me.
I knew that there was going to be some serious nuggets of gold here today. I told you I'd be here as host, but also audience member. I feel as though I have fulfilled my role. What would be amazing?
We were having a dialogue.
I know, but listen, just let me enjoy, just bask in the sunshine. But there'll be something that I think that everyone would love is afterwards, if you could share in the comments the book that helped you get to your life purpose statement, because I think everyone would be curious to kind of know what that is, who wrote it, etc., etc. That would be amazing. Yeah. And besides that,
Purpose-Driven Life, Rick Warren. The Purpose-Driven Life.
Rick who, sorry?
Rick Warren.
Warren, okay.
Yes.
Did everyone get that? The Purpose-Driven Life, Rick Warren. Good.
Yes.
So thank you, Keith. It has been a pleasure. I'm reading all the comments. Everybody's enjoyed it. So, it has been a blast. Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and we will see you again soon. And the replay will be available pretty much after we end the broadcast. So thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Leanne. My pleasure.